The royal flagship Zephyr Crown drifted through a cold stretch of deep space like a wounded giant. Its once bright hull was scorched black. Long cracks ran across the silver plates where weapons had struck and engines had burned. Tiny blue sparks jumped from broken panels, each spark a quiet cry for help. Inside the ship, the air smelled of metal and smoke. Machines groaned as if they knew the end was near. Across the stars, the Zephyr Crown was more than a vessel. It was a living symbol of the Soulless Empire, an empire that ruled 1,000 worlds and never bowed to anyone. The ship carried old magic in its core, a power that many believed came from the dawn of the galaxy. To see it failing was like watching a sun die. Alarms echoed through endless corridors. Engineers of many species rushed from chamber to chamber, their clawed feet clicking on the metal floors. They spoke in sharp, frightened voices. They tried every code, every ritual, every tool. Nothing worked. The great crystal engine at the heart of the ship pulsed weakly, light fading with each slow beat. If the core went dark, the Emperor and all aboard would be lost. An empire could fall in a single night. On a quiet orbital station far from the noise of power, a human mechanic named Eli Grant wiped grease from his hands and stared at a blinking emergency broadcast on the wall screen. He was tall for a human, but seemed small among the giant travelers who passed through the station. His coveralls were old and patched. His toolkit, dented and scratched, had traveled more than he ever would. Most days he fixed cargo doors or patched worn circuits for small pay and little thanks. The broadcast repeated in a calm, urgent voice, "Critical systems failing on Imperial flagship Zephyr Crown. Immediate assistance requested. All qualified engineers respond." Eli set down his wrench. He could have ignored it. Many would. The Soulless Empire was not his home. Humans had only a small place in their grand councils. Most people believed a lone human with a box of tools had no business near a ship that old or a core that mysterious. But Eli heard something inside the message that others might miss. A faint rhythm behind the words, like a heartbeat losing strength. Machines had their own language, and he had always listened better than most. He imagined the great engine struggling to breathe and felt a pull he could not name. He grabbed his toolkit. No speeches, no planning, just a quiet decision. Go. The station master, a heavy-scaled alien with wide yellow eyes, looked up as Eli headed for the docking bay. "You heard the call?" the master asked. "Yeah. You think you can help an Imperial core?" There was no mockery in the question, only worry. Eli shrugged. "I think I can try." The master studied him for a long moment, then nodded and stepped aside. "Then may the stars guide you." The shuttle ride was silent except for the low hum of engines. Through the small window, Eli watched the Zephyr Crown grow larger, a dark shadow against the glitter of distant stars. Even wounded, it was beautiful, its curved wings catching what little light drifted through the void. He felt the weight of what waited for him, but his hands stayed steady. The shuttle clamped to the flagship's side with a dull thud. As the airlock hissed open, a sharp scent of ozone met him. 2 Imperial guards stood there, tall and bright-eyed, armor gleaming even in the emergency lights. Each held a long spear of charged energy. "You? A human?" one guard said, voice low and hard. "I'm an engineer," Eli answered. "I came to help." The other guard tilted his head, 4 black eyes narrowing. "No human has worked on a royal core. You think you can do what our own cannot?" Eli met the stare without flinching. "I think your ship is dying while we stand here talking." The guards glanced at each other. Behind them, alarms pulsed red across the walls. Finally, the first guard stepped aside. "Follow. But if you fail, the Emperor will decide your fate." Eli followed them into the grand corridor. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of burned metal. The floor beneath his boots vibrated with the uneven heartbeat of the great ship. Along the walls, intricate carvings told stories of the Soulless line. Centuries of victories, promises of eternal strength. Now dust and smoke dulled their shine. They reached the central chamber, a hall so vast it felt like a planet's sky turned inside out. At its center stood Emperor Veyron Solus, ruler of 1,000 worlds. He was taller than any human, his dark robes flowing like a river of night. 4 luminous eyes glowed a deep silver. Power hung around him like a storm ready to break. The guards bowed. Eli stayed standing. He wasn't sure if it was bravery or simple confusion. "You came alone?" the Emperor asked, his voice deep as distant thunder. "Yes," Eli said. You believe you can save my ship when my finest engineers have failed? Eli took a breath. I can try. That's all I can promise. The Emperor studied him for a long moment. The chamber was silent except for the weak thrum of the fading engine. Then Veyron gave a slow, deliberate nod. Then try. The guards led Eli deeper, through a heavy door into the heart of the flagship. The room beyond pulsed with dim blue light. The great crystal core stood like a wounded heart, cracks glowing faintly across its surface. Sparks jumped and faded in the dark. Eli stepped forward, feeling the gentle vibration through the floor, through his bones. He laid a hand on the console. The metal was warm, almost alive, he whispered, though no one asked him to speak. All right, he said softly as if to a frightened child. Let's see what you're telling me. The chamber holding the royal engine felt like the inside of a living star. The walls were a swirl of deep blue and silver veins that pulsed with weak light. A low hum echoed through the space, soft and tired, like a giant trying to breathe through broken lungs. Eli stepped onto the grated floor and felt the vibration climb up through his boots. Each step was a slow drumbeat. The air was warm and smelled of scorched metal. Sparks flickered in the shadows like small frightened eyes. Behind him, the Emperor's guards stopped at the door. Their tall frames were motionless but tense, like arrows pulled back on a bowstring. They would not enter. Only Eli was allowed near the core now. The silence was heavy. He placed his hand on the nearest console. The metal was hot, almost alive. He closed his eyes for a moment and listened, not with ears, but with the quiet sense he had carried since childhood. Machines had their own language, the faint tremor of power, the rhythm of circuits, the small cries of pieces in pain. This one whispered of fear. Eli opened his eyes and scanned the controls. Ancient symbols glowed faintly, written in a language older than any human tongue. He could not read it in the way one reads a book, but he understood patterns, shapes repeated like musical notes. He could feel which lines carried energy and which bled it away. A voice broke the silence behind him. You hear it, don't you? Eli turned. Emperor Veyron Solis had entered without a sound. The tall ruler's silver eyes gleamed in the dim light. His dark cloak trailed across the floor like a slice of night sky. I hear something, Eli admitted. Most who come here hear only noise, Veyron said, his voice a low rumble. They press buttons. They run tests, they fail. But you stand still and listen. Interesting. Eli swallowed but kept his voice steady. Machines talk if you're patient. You just have to let them. The Emperor studied him for a long, silent moment. What do you need to save her? He finally asked. Access, Eli said, and no one telling me to hurry. The Emperor gave a slow nod. You have both. But know this, human, if you fail, the ship dies, and so might we all. I understand, Eli replied. He set to work. From his battered toolkit, he pulled out small scanners, thin wires, a datapad covered with scratches. Compared to the gleaming alien tech around him, his tools looked almost childish. But they were his. They worked because he knew them. He traced the glowing conduits with careful fingers. He felt for heat where there should be none, for silence where there should be hum. He found a cluster of fractured lines near the heart of the core. Cracks like spiderwebs radiated from a central crystal. Energy leaked in faint blue streams. Eli frowned. This was no simple break. It was as if the ship itself had fought something vast and angry and lost. He pulled a cable from his pack and began to link his old human datapad to the alien interface. Sparks snapped as the two systems touched. The guards at the door shifted, but Eli didn't flinch. He typed quick commands, his eyes darting between readings and the faint pulse of the core. The datapad flickered, confused by the alien language. He spoke to it softly, as he always did. Easy there. We'll figure it out. Lines of strange symbols scrolled across the screen. He translated by instinct, matching rhythm to rhythm until a pattern emerged. He found the failing sequence, a feedback loop choking the engine like a knot in a vein. He needed to restart the loop, but gently. A sudden surge would shatter the crystal. Too slow and the ship would bleed out first. Hours passed unnoticed. Sweat ran down Eli's temples and soaked the collar of his coveralls. His hands were black with dust and tiny burns. He barely blinked, afraid to lose a single flicker of data. At one point, the core dimmed so sharply that the chamber plunged into near darkness. A cold fear gripped him. He pressed his palm to the main relay and whispered, "Stay with me. I'm right here." The engine gave a soft, answering tremor like a tired heartbeat. He adjusted another line. rerouted a strand of code, replaced a melted fuse with a strip of human copper wire. The core shuddered and pulsed brighter for an instant. Behind him, he heard the Emperor's voice, low and cautious. "Do you speak to it?" "Sometimes," Eli said without looking back. "Sometimes they need to know someone cares." Varen was silent, but the air behind Eli felt less cold. Finally, Eli found the last broken link, a thin silver filament deep inside the main housing. It glowed faintly but carried no power. The access panel was sealed with an ancient lock, a puzzle of shifting shapes that refused every tool he tried. He stared at it, heart pounding. Without that final repair, all the other work would mean nothing. He closed his eyes again and breathed. He remembered his first lesson as a young mechanic on a dusty human outpost. Listen before you force. He placed both hands on the panel and listened. The shapes shifted beneath his fingertips, clicking in a subtle rhythm. Slowly, patiently, he moved his hands with the pattern. Click. Pause. Click, click. Pause. A final twist. The panel side open. Inside, the filament lay broken like a snapped guitar string. Eli slid in a new wire from his kit, soldered it with a careful burst of heat, and tightened the clasp. The engine gave a low, rising hum. Blue light flooded the chamber, bright enough to make him squint. The cracked crystal began to glow steady and strong. The floor trembled under his boots. Eli stepped back, chest heaving. He wiped sweat and grime from his brow. The core's heartbeat was no longer weak. It was alive. Powerful. Behind him, the Emperor exhaled, a sound like a quiet storm passing. "You have done what no one else could," Varen said, his voice softer than before. Eli looked at the glowing engine and managed a tired smile. She just needed someone to listen. Varen's silver eyes caught the new light. Perhaps so. The guards entered, their faces a mix of awe and disbelief. They looked at the human with something close to respect. The Emperor straightened to his full towering height. "The Zephyr Crown lives again," he declared. His voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. "The Empire breathes because of you." Eli only nodded, too tired for words. The great ship's steady hum was answer enough. The Zephyr Crown drifted through the endless dark, but now the old flagship pulsed with new life. Deep inside the ship's great core, steady blue light washed across the chamber walls. The soft hum of the engine was no longer weak. It was a low, confident heartbeat. Eli Grant stood with his hands braced on the warm console. Hours of work had left his fingers blistered and black with grease, but he didn't move away. He needed a few moments to be sure the engine stayed strong. He watched the lights settle into a rhythm, bright, dim, like the breathing of a sleeping giant. Behind him, Emperor Varen Solus watched as well. The tall ruler's silver eyes reflected the blue glow, their usual sharpness softened by wonder. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the calm vibration of power filling the ship again. Finally, Varen stepped closer, his heavy cloak whispering across the floor. "It feels alive," the Emperor said. His deep voice held something like awe. Eli nodded. "She always was. Just needed someone to listen." "You speak as if the ship has a soul," Varen said. "Maybe she does," Eli replied quietly. "Machines have hearts just different from ours." This one was hurting. The Emperor tilted his head. "And you healed her?" Eli gave a tired shrug. "I only fixed what was broken." But Varen heard more than humility in the human's voice. He heard truth, the kind that spoke of respect, not conquest. The guards who had waited outside now entered the chamber, their tall frames tense with both relief and disbelief. Their armor caught the new blue light, turning them into silver shadows. One guard lowered his spear and bowed his head toward Eli, an action no one expected. The others followed, a quiet sign of honor in their culture. Eli shifted uncomfortably. "You don't have to do that," he said. "You gave back the heart of our empire," the first guard replied, his voice steady but reverent. "Respect is earned." The words settled heavily in the air. Eli, who had spent most of his life fixing small cargo doors and broken vents, suddenly felt the weight of something far bigger than himself. Varen turned to the guards. "Send word to every deck," he commanded, voice rising with authority. "Tell them the core is whole. The Zephyr Crown sails again." The guards bowed and left quickly, their footsteps ringing against the metal floor. The Emperor looked back at Eli. "Do you understand what you have done, human?" Eli wiped his hands on a rag pulled from his pocket. I fixed an engine. You saved an empire, Varen said, his tone almost a growl. This ship is more than steel and crystal. It carries the memory of our ancestors, the strength of our people. When the Zephyr crown dies, the Solus name dies with it. You have given life not only to this vessel, but to our history. Eli met the Emperor's intense gaze but said nothing. Words felt too small. They walked out of the chamber together. The corridors that had been dim and smoke-filled now glowed with steady light. Systems clicked alive one by one. Screens lit up with soft green symbols. Crew members of many species paused as the Emperor passed, their eyes wide when they saw the human at his side. Whispers followed them through every hall. Is that the one? The human? The one who saved us? Eli felt their stares but kept his head down. He wasn't used to attention. He was used to being another pair of quiet hands in the background. The Emperor noticed. You do not enjoy praise, Varen observed. I'm a mechanic, Eli said simply. Work's done. That's enough. They entered a grand observation deck. Wide windows opened to the starfield beyond. The black of space glittered with countless lights, each star a silent witness to their passage. The Emperor stood with his hands clasped behind him. Look, he said. The galaxy waits. Soon they will hear that a human saved the Zephyr crown. The story will travel faster than light. There will be shock. And fear, Eli asked. Yes, Varen said, because power respects power. And today a single human held the power to change the fate of an empire. Eli frowned. I didn't mean it like that. I just wanted to keep people alive. That is exactly why they will fear and respect your kind, the Emperor replied. Hours passed as the ship's systems stabilized. Eli moved from station to station, checking the connections he had patched, listening for any faint cry of failing energy. The crew followed his instructions without question now. Where earlier they had looked at him with doubt, now they obeyed with quiet trust. At one point, a young alien technician approached, eyes wide and curious. How did you know what to do? She asked. Eli offered a small smile. I listened. To what? To everything. The hum of the wires, the rhythm of the core. Machines talk if you listen close enough. She nodded slowly as if the idea was a revelation. When the last system reported green, Eli finally allowed himself a deep breath. He felt exhaustion press against his bones, but a warm satisfaction filled his chest. The Zephyr crown was no longer a dying giant. She was awake, proud, and strong. Emperor Varen approached again. You should rest, he said. But first you must stand with me when I address the Empire. They must see the one who brought our heart back to life. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not good with crowds. Neither am I, Varen said with a rare, almost human smile. But sometimes we must stand where others can see, so they remember what is possible. As the artificial night cycle began aboard the ship, Eli walked back to the engine chamber one last time. He placed a hand on the warm console and whispered, You did good, girl. Stay strong. The core responded with a soft, steady hum that seemed almost like a purr. For a moment he stood alone, listening to the heartbeat of the giant he had saved. The stars outside were endless and silent, but Eli felt a quiet connection between himself, the ship, and every spark of life in the galaxy. He didn't need applause. The hum of a healed engine was the only thanks he required. The Zephyr crown moved through space with a new gentle rhythm. After long hours of fear, the ship's deep pulse was steady again. Lights across every corridor glowed like calm stars, but the crew still carried a quiet tension in their voices. They were waiting for one last test, full engine ignition. Eli Grant stood near the central control deck, rubbing his tired hands together. He had checked every circuit twice, maybe 3 times. Still, he felt the weight of the moment pressing on his shoulders. The Emperor approached, tall and silent, his silver eyes reflecting the soft blue of the core readouts. The final sequence is ready, Varen said. When you give the word, the flagship will rise to power. Eli nodded slowly. Let's do it. A low chime echoed across the deck. Officers and engineers of many species turned toward the great screen above them. Each knew what was at stake. The Zephyr crown had not reached full power in days. If the restart failed, they could lose everything again. The Emperor stepped forward to address his crew. His voice carried like rolling thunder. All systems are green. We begin the ignition of the royal core. Remain at stations. Witness the return of our heart. Every being on the deck went silent. The air felt thick as if the entire ship held its breath. Eli took a final glance at the glowing control panel. Numbers scrolled steady and sure. He pressed the activation key. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Only the faint hum of standby power filled the air. Then a deep, low vibration rumbled through the floor. It grew, a slow thunder rising from the belly of the ship. The walls trembled. Lights brightened. The Zephyr Crown answered the call. The engine's roar filled every hall. A wave of blue light burst along the central core, spreading outward like a sunrise through the metal veins of the ship. The vibration became music, a steady, powerful rhythm that made the deck plates sing. Cheers erupted. Officers pounded their consoles with open palms. Technicians laughed, some wiping tears from their eyes. The sound of hope flooded the air like a storm of joy. Eli stepped back, stunned by the sudden brightness. He had known the engine would start, but the power of it stole his breath. It wasn't just a machine running again. It was a living giant waking from a long, dark sleep. The Emperor raised both arms high. "Behold the soul of the Solus Empire reborn!" His voice rolled across the deck like a victory bell. The crew answered with a roar of their own, a sound that shook the walls. Varen turned to Eli, eyes shining brighter than the engine light. "You have done what legends could not," he said. "Our finest minds failed, yet you, a single human, brought life back to the ship." Eli felt heat rise in his face. "I just fixed what was broken." The Emperor smiled, a rare, almost gentle expression. "You speak as if this is small, but you have returned hope to billions." He took a step closer, his towering presence filling the space around them. "Tell me, Eli Grant, what reward would you claim? Gold from 100 worlds? A planet to rule? A title in my court?" Eli blinked, surprised. He had not thought of reward. He only remembered the quiet call of a failing engine and the need to answer. "I don't need riches," he said after a moment. "Just make sure your people can breathe easier. Fix what's broken beyond this ship. That's enough for me." The Emperor studied him for a long time. "A humble request," he said finally, "and a powerful one." The celebration did not fade quickly. Across the decks, music from alien instruments began to play. Crew members of every shape and color danced or clapped. Some pressed their foreheads together in ancient gestures of thanks. Eli moved quietly among them, checking systems while they rejoiced. He was glad for their joy, but he felt no need to join the noise. His reward was already humming beneath his feet, the steady beat of a ship alive. As he walked, small groups stopped him to offer thanks. A young pilot with shimmering wings bowed deeply. A pair of engineers clasped his hands and called him "Friend of the Stars." Their eyes shone with a respect he had rarely seen in any port or station. Still, he remained modest. "It was the ship," he said each time. "She just needed someone to listen." Later, when the excitement slowed, the Emperor invited Eli to the grand hall at the heart of the Flagship. It was a vast chamber of crystal and silver, its ceiling a dome of living light that reflected the galaxy outside. Varen motioned for him to stand at the center. "The Empire must hear what you have done," the Emperor said. "Not as rumor, but as truth. Billions will know your name." Eli shifted uneasily. "I'm not much for speeches." "You need not speak long," Varen assured him. "Your presence will speak enough." A slow hush fell as crew and officers gathered in the hall. The great doors opened to reveal screens broadcasting the moment to distant worlds. Holographic relays carried the scene to every system loyal to the Solus line. The Emperor's voice rang clear. "People of the Solus Empire," he began, "our heart beats again. The Zephyr Crown sails because one soul refused to let her die. Behold the human Eli Grant who saved the vessel of our ancestors. Remember his courage, for it bridges every star between us." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Their cheers rolled through the grand hall and out across the galaxy, carried by countless transmitters. Eli felt a wave of emotion rise, stronger than he expected. He had never stood before such a vast audience. He thought of the small workshops where he had spent his life, the quiet hours fixing things no one else cared to fix. He thought of the lonely stations and the endless black of space. Now billions watched him, yet he remained the same man, someone who listened to machines when others only shouted at them. He looked up at the Emperor and gave a small nod. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the simple words reached the entire hall. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was respect. When the gathering ended, Veyron walked beside him back toward the engine chamber. "You asked for nothing," the Emperor said. "That alone moves me. But know this, Eli Grant, I will not forget." "The galaxy will not forget." Eli offered a faint smile. "Just keep her flying," he said, resting a hand against the smooth wall. "That's all the thanks I need." The ship's deep hum answered, steady and strong. It sounded to Eli like quiet applause. The Zephyr Crown sailed again, her great crystal core glowing like a small sun against the endless black of space. Where silence and fear had ruled only a day before, a steady heartbeat now filled every corridor. The flagship's rebirth was more than a technical victory. It was a message sent to every corner of the galaxy. News spread faster than light. At first it moved through the soulless fleets, encrypted signals flashing from ship to ship. Each crew passing the words with stunned disbelief. "The Emperor's flagship lives. A human saved her." Then the message escaped beyond the Empire. Traders carried it across jump lanes. Smugglers repeated it in smoky station bars. By the time a single day had passed, the story had reached worlds where no soulless banner flew. On a mining colony of red dust, a group of tired workers gathered around a flickering holoscreen. They watched shaky footage of the engine coming alive, the blue glow reflecting in their wide eyes. "A human," one miner whispered. "Just one man?" "That's what they say," replied another, voice thick with wonder. "Fixed the Emperor's own ship when every alien genius failed." The miners exchanged looks that held more than surprise. There was hope there, a quiet spark for people who lived far from power. If one mechanic from a small, often overlooked species could save an empire's greatest ship, maybe the powerful were not untouchable after all. On a green world ruled by old enemies of the Solus, leaders gathered in a high council chamber. They replayed the images of Eli standing beside Emperor Veyron. "Impossible," one counselor hissed. "A human doing what our best minds could not?" Another leaned forward, eyes sharp. "It is not impossible. It is a reminder. Humans adapt. They listen. Perhaps we have underestimated them." A long silence followed, filled with uneasy respect. Back aboard the Zephyr Crown, Eli Grant was unaware of the storm his work had unleashed. He moved quietly through the ship, checking panels, making sure every circuit stayed true. Crew members greeted him with nods of admiration or quiet words of thanks. Some left small gifts at his workstation, a polished crystal from a distant moon, a strip of fine fabric woven with silver thread, a carved figure of the ship itself. Eli accepted each with a polite smile but set them aside. His satisfaction was in the hum of the engine, not in treasures. One evening, as he tightened a relay in a maintenance bay, a young alien pilot approached. Her skin shimmered like starlight, her eyes a deep violet. "Is it true," she asked softly, "that you came alone without a team or advanced codes?" Eli nodded. "Just me and a toolbox." The pilot tilted her head, amazement in her gaze. "How did you know what to do?" He wiped his hands on a cloth. "I listened. The ship told me where it hurt." The pilot smiled, a slow, thoughtful curve of her lips. "Our best engineers only measured and calculated. Maybe we forgot how to listen." While the crew spoke of him with respect, messages from distant worlds poured into the Emperor's private channels. Some were full of praise. Others carried quiet warnings. Allies celebrated the miracle. Rivals weighed what it meant for the balance of power. In the Emperor's grand chamber, Veyron read each message in silence. He understood what many did not. This was more than a repair. It was a shift. A single human, unknown and unarmed, had touched the heart of an empire and changed its course. The Emperor summoned Eli late one night. The grand hall was empty except for the two of them and the gentle hum of the ship. "You have become a story," Veyron said, his deep voice echoing in the vast space. "I didn't mean to," Eli replied, standing with his hands loosely at his sides. "Stories rarely ask permission," the Emperor said. "They simply grow." He stepped closer, his silver eyes reflecting the starlight pouring through the tall windows. "Do you know what your name means now?" "Children speak it on worlds you have never seen. Leaders who once dismissed humanity now watch them with new respect. And some with fear." Eli looked down at his worn boots. "I just fixed an engine." "Yes," Veyron said quietly. "And in doing so, you have reminded the galaxy that greatness can come from anywhere, even from a quiet human who listens when others will not." The next morning, as the ship approached a bustling trade hub, the proof of those words became clear. Docks and platforms were crowded with beings of every species, waiting not only to see the Emperor's restored flagship, but to catch a glimpse of the human who saved it. When Eli stepped onto the observation deck, a wave of sound rose from the gathering outside. Cheers, songs, strange musical calls that blended into a single roar of welcome. He froze, stunned. Varen joined him, a faint smile beneath his regal calm. "They are here for the ship," the Emperor said, "but also for you." Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm no hero." "Heroes rarely think they are," Varen replied. Messages from Earth soon arrived as well. Simple transmissions filled with pride. A child's drawing of a mechanic standing beside a starship. A teacher's note saying students now spoke of studying engineering, of listening to machines. Eli read them late at night, sitting alone by a viewport. He felt a quiet warmth in his chest. Maybe he had given more than he realized, not just to an empire but to his own people, who now stood a little taller among the stars. Across the galaxy, the story took on a life of its own. Traders told it as a legend in the making, the human who healed a giant. Musicians wrote songs of the night the flagship's heart beat again. Children acted out the tale with small toy ships, pretending to listen for the hum of hidden engines. Even those who had never met a human spoke of Eli Grant as if they knew him, a mechanic with patient hands and a calm voice, a man who heard what others could not. And so the whispers spread. Traveling like bright sparks on the dark currents of space, they carried not only the facts of the repair but something deeper, a quiet lesson that greatness does not always roar. Sometimes it speaks in the soft voice of someone who listens, who cares, and who dares to try when all others have given up. Eli never sought to be a symbol, yet across worlds and across species, his simple act of listening became a reminder that the smallest voice can echo across the stars. The Zephyr Crown glided into the heart of the soulless capital, a world of silver towers and endless blue skies. From orbit, the planet shimmered like a jewel. For centuries, only the Empire's highest rulers were welcomed with ceremony here. Now a single human mechanic stood among them. Eli Grant followed the Emperor down the grand ramp of the flagship. The landing plaza below blazed with golden banners and humming energy lights. Thousands of citizens filled the square, their voices rising in a low, musical chant. It was not only for the Emperor. It was for the human who had given life back to their beloved ship. Eli's heart pounded as he stepped into the open. The sound of the crowd washed over him. Cheers, whistles, a strange harmonic note sung by hundreds of alien throats. He had never felt so small and so seen at the same time. The Imperial Guards formed two glittering lines, their crystal armor catching the sun. Between them stretched a path of light leading to the Hall of Crowns, the seat of soulless power. Emperor Varen walked with a calm dignity, but his silver eyes sparkled as he glanced at Eli. "Breathe," the Emperor said softly. "I'm trying," Eli muttered, gripping the strap of his tool bag like a lifeline. The crowd parted as they approached the great doors. Massive and carved with star maps, the doors opened without a sound. Inside, the hall glowed with soft blue light. A floor of polished stone reflected the high ceiling where shimmering constellations floated like living art. Leaders from distant systems waited within. Advisors, counselors, even rival envoys who had rushed to witness the event. Whispers spread as Eli entered. Some eyes held awe, others calculation, but all watched the human who had become a legend overnight. At the far end of the hall stood a raised platform. Upon it rested a circular table of crystal that seemed to hold a miniature galaxy within its surface. Varen led Eli to its center. With a slow, deliberate motion, the Emperor turned to the assembly. "People of Solace," Varen's voice echoed, rich and commanding. "You know this man. He is Eli Grant of Earth. When our flagship, symbol of our unity, fell silent, when even our greatest minds failed, he listened. He gave back the heartbeat of our empire. For that he deserves more than words." The hall grew silent, expectant. Varen faced Eli. "Name what you desire. Wealth, land, a fleet of your own, anything within my power." Eli swallowed hard. The weight of 1,000 stares pressed down on him. He had never imagined a reward. He only wanted to fix an engine to help. Riches meant nothing to him. He thought of Earth, Its crowded cities, the quiet shop where his mother still worked, the kids who now dreamed of the stars. "I don't need riches," Eli said finally, his voice steady but soft. "But I have a request." "Speak it," Varen said. "I want knowledge shared," Eli said. "Let the Solas teach humanity what you know about the stars, about energy, about building ships. And let us teach you what we know about listening, about working with our hands. No walls between us, just understanding." Gasps rippled through the hall. Some counselors exchanged startled looks. Knowledge was power. The Empire guarded its deepest sciences with care. Offering it freely was unheard of. Varen's gaze searched Eli's face for a long, quiet moment. Then the Emperor's lips curved into a slow, genuine smile. "You ask not for yourself but for all," he said. "You honor us." He turned to the council. "Let it be written. From this day, Solus and Earth will share learning without barrier. Engineers, healers, and thinkers will walk between our worlds as equals." The hall erupted in sound. Some cheers, some startled cries, but the Emperor raised a hand and silence returned. "This," Varen declared, "is the reward of the human who reminded us of humility. This is the path to a future greater than any empire alone." Eli felt a sudden tightness in his chest. He had expected a simple thank you, maybe a medal. Instead, he had sparked an alliance that could reshape galaxies. He looked down, overwhelmed, but Varen stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have done more than repair a ship," the Emperor said quietly so only Eli could hear. "You have repaired something far older, the bond between different hearts." The ceremony continued with music that filled the vast chamber. Strange instruments sang with clear, ringing tones like liquid light. Dancers moved in spirals that mimicked the turning of planets. Eli stood beside Varen, unsure how to react but deeply moved by the beauty around him. Later, as the guests mingled, delegations from rival systems approached Eli with cautious respect. A tall figure with emerald skin bowed slightly. "Your people are remarkable," she said. "Perhaps we misjudged humanity." Eli offered a modest smile. "We have a lot to learn, too." Another envoy extended a delicate hand of translucent crystal. "May we visit your world?" he asked. "Of course," Eli replied. "You might like our sunsets." They exchanged a small laugh, simple, human, and alien at once. As the night deepened, Eli found himself on a balcony high above the capital. Stars stretched across the black velvet sky, brighter than he had ever seen. The city below pulsed with light and music, a living heartbeat. Footsteps approached. Varen joined him, his long cloak brushing the stone. "You changed today's course for many worlds," the Emperor said. Eli leaned on the balcony rail. "I just asked for what felt right." "That is what makes it powerful," Varen replied. He looked at the stars, his expression thoughtful. "Power often shouts. Wisdom speaks softly. You have reminded us to listen." They stood together in silence, two figures from distant planets bound by an unlikely friendship. Far below, the people of the capital celebrated. Lights from thousands of homes and towers shimmered like galaxies fallen to the surface. Songs drifted upward, tales already growing about the human who came with a simple toolbox and left with a promise between worlds. Eli breathed in the cool night air. He felt no pride, only a quiet contentment. He thought of the engine's first heartbeat, the soft thrum that had started all of this. That sound still echoed in his mind, a reminder that even the smallest action could send ripples through the stars. Later, as he prepared to return to the Zephyr Crown, a child ran up to him, a young Solus girl with bright silver eyes. She held out a small crystal star on a thin cord. "For you," she said shyly. "You listened when we were afraid." Eli knelt to accept it. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm. "I'll keep it safe." The child smiled and darted back into the crowd. Eli closed his hand around the tiny star. Its gentle glow felt like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. That night, as the flagship rested above the shining capital, whispers of the Emperor's reward traveled outward. Across trade routes and hidden stations, beings of every kind spoke of the human who asked for knowledge instead of gold. A mechanic from a small blue planet had turned an act of repair into a bridge between civilizations, and the stars, endless and watching, seemed to shine a little brighter for it. The Zephyr Crown drifted above Earth's moon like a second dawn. Its silver hull caught the sunlight, sending long spears of brightness across the quiet void. Below, blue oceans and swirling white clouds turned slowly, a living jewel. For the first time in history, a soulless flagship came not as a conqueror or a visitor of curiosity, but as a friend. Eli Grant stood at the great viewport, the small crystal star the child had given him hanging around his neck. Beside him, Emperor Varen watched Earth with quiet wonder. "It is smaller than I imagine," Varen said softly. Eli smiled. "It's home. We like it that way." When the news reached Earth that the Emperor of the Soulless Empire was arriving in person, people filled every spaceport and city square. Children held handmade signs. Scientists rushed to prepare welcomes. Old radio towers that once broadcasted only local chatter now pulsed with signals of excitement. For centuries, humans had looked at the stars with distant hope. Now the stars were looking back and walking among them. The flagship lowered over a vast plain outside Geneva where the United Worlds Council had built a landing ring. From miles away, families and students crowded the fields, their cheers echoing like a single endless heartbeat. As the ramp descended, Eli led Varen into the soft sunlight. Cameras and drones hovered, capturing every step. A gentle wind stirred, carrying the smell of grass and distant rain. World leaders stood waiting. Scientists, engineers, and children chosen to present gifts. They bowed not to an emperor, but in mutual respect. Varen returned the gesture, his silver cloak shimmering in the earthlight. A young boy stepped forward, clutching a small model of a spacecraft carved from wood. His voice trembled as he looked up at the towering soulless ruler. "Welcome to Earth," he said. "We hope you like our sky." Varen knelt, lowering himself to meet the child's gaze. "Your sky," he said, "is beautiful. And your people have great courage," the boy beamed, and the crowd erupted in warm applause. For many watching, it was the first time an alien ruler had seemed simply human. Inside the council dome, leaders and soulless envoys gathered for a historic exchange. Plans for shared research, joint starship programs, and cultural academies unfolded across glowing screens. Human engineers leaned forward with shining eyes as soulless scientists demonstrated energy systems that had once been only dreams. Eli moved quietly through the discussions, answering questions, bridging small gaps of language and custom. He was not a politician, yet everyone seemed to find comfort in his calm presence. At one table, a soulless mathematician traced a complex diagram of energy flows. "Your mechanic's insight," she said to a group of human engineers, "taught us to listen for a ship's natural rhythm. We had forgotten that machines have voices." A human technician grinned. "Guess that means we can teach each other after all." Later that evening, as twilight deepened over the Earth, a great gathering filled the plain. Lanterns floated upward like small stars. Music from both worlds mingled, deep soulless harmonics and gentle earth melodies weaving into a single song. Eli stood near a small fire, watching strangers share food and stories. A soulless dancer twirled with a human violinist in easy laughter. Children from both species chased each other, their shouts blending in the warm air. Varen approached, his silver eyes reflecting the lantern light. "Do you see what you have begun?" he asked. Eli shook his head. "I didn't begin it. Everyone here did. I just fixed an engine," the Emperor smiled. "Sometimes the smallest act is the key that unlocks a universe." As night fell, the stars emerged, bright and endless. People looked up together, no longer wondering if anyone watched from those distant lights. They knew. Varen raised his voice so all could hear. "Tonight, two worlds stand not as ruler and subject, but as equals. Let this friendship be the first stone in a bridge that will outlive us all." Cheers and music answered him, rising into the clear night until it felt as if even the stars were singing. When the celebrations faded and the crowd drifted to rest, Eli wandered to the edge of a quiet hill. The grass was cool beneath his boots. Above him, the zephyr crown glowed faintly against the constellations. Footsteps approached. It was his mother, her eyes shining with both pride and disbelief. "You've been gone so long," she whispered. "And now?" "All this," Eli smiled softly. "I only fixed a ship, Mom." She touched the crystal star at his neck. "Maybe. But you also fixed the space between hearts." They stood together in silence, watching the flagship that had changed everything. Before dawn, the soulless crew prepared to depart. Varen met Eli near the base of the ramp. "Your world needs you," the Emperor said, "but so do the stars. Our alliance will grow stronger if you walk between us." Eli looked at Earth's horizon, where the first light of morning spread across the clouds. "I'll go where I'm needed," he said. Varen clasped his forearm, a warrior's gesture of respect. Then the galaxy is already brighter. When the Zephyr crown lifted toward the sky, thousands watched in reverent silence. Its engines pulsed with the same steady rhythm Eli had once heard in the quiet of a failing heart. The ship rose higher, a silver promise against the pale dawn. People would tell the story again and again, how a mechanic from a small blue planet listened when others only measured, how he asked for knowledge instead of riches, how he bridged the stars. Years later, children across two worlds would hold small crystal stars and whisper his name with wonder. They would become engineers, healers, explorers, builders of a future where no one stood alone. And above every planet, the stars would keep their silent watch, remembering the day a human fixed a ship and healed a galaxy.